So this week I wanted to give myself a challenge and build an ad for the lightsaber and really make it like mythic and epic. I think the real challenge though was making it lore accurate. I don't know if you know, but there's a huge amount of information that goes into the lightsaber. Like everything that goes into it has a part and something that makes sense in the build. So I wanted to take this seriously and make a lightsaber ad that made sense, but also kind of make it look interesting and inspired by Apple or title sequences, and just like really kind of go with it. So it's educational and fun, but also like serious and has a darker tone like the rest of Star Wars. So let me walk you through the design, the thought, the build, and then the final animation right at the end. So before doing any of this, I actually had to know what the lore was. The lightsaber is broken up into 3 different parts: the power assembly, the crystal energy chamber, and then the emitter assembly. The power assembly has a battery, interesting rings that hold it all together. The crystal energy chamber has all these different parts that hold the crystals together, which there are 2 of them, which again I didn't know. The emitter assembly, cylinder piece in the middle, basically watching the energy or like controlling it. And finally you have the blade arc tip that's actually projecting the energy out of the sword. From all of that drew up a storyboard that I thought would make sense, but also had all these parts that were lore accurate to the lightsaber. So once I was ready with the storyboard, I basically came in and mocked up the entire lightsaber using the box cutter add-on. I hadn't used this before and it was really nice and super simple. Once I had the pieces in place, I used them as like blocks by setting them to wire mode and then putting a ton of pieces together, basically using a sci-fi kit that I found online, kind of like Legos, and like come up with different interesting designs, and that ultimately made the entire animation for the most part. Again, for the construction, I had the diadium power core and then the power vortex rings that go around it, and then eventually enclosing the entire thing with the actual part from the lightsaber. From there, I used another asset from BlenderKit to make the primary crystal mount, but I thought it'd be really interesting to have like a more abstract version of the Kyber crystal, which of course kind of defeats the point of going lore accurate, but I thought it could be cool if it had this sort of like crystal energy that was like coming together, and so it was like crunching it down basically, which, you know, ultimately became kind of cool. I went from Embergen to Blender, and then in Blender I made a volume to mesh node, and then exported all of that and then put it back into Blender so it could play in real time, and it worked beautifully. For the last part with the emitter, I actually broke this up into 2 different parts. I knew that I wanted to continue along with this sort of like product design motion graphic element, but I also didn't want to take away from all the stuff that I already built, so I made it a little fast and exciting, but also just kind of let it build up to the motion of where we were going already. So for the emitter, I have all the parts, which is really interesting because there are a lot of parts to it. There's the cycling field energizers, there's blade energy channel, and then there's these interesting things called energy modulation circuits that are like supposedly constantly watching what the blade is doing, and I just think that's super fascinating. It just like gives more life to this blade that already has sort of like presence and like essence to it, even though it's technically like a piece of circuitry and, you know, mechanics. The tip. Now, again, I designed my own sort of system here. It's not just a regular lightsaber. So it's sort of these like nanobots that are like coming out and like forming the tip, but it also still kind of goes along with the product animation title sequence vibes that we had already established. So there's this really interesting thing called the blade emitter shroud that's just basically supposed to protect the Jedi when they're wielding the lightsaber. Now, I was really fascinated about that, and I decided spinning effect, where it's just like continuing to guard the Jedi, but it would also deflect other lightsabers like we've seen in the movies quite a few times, with the actual turning on of the lightsaber much more dramatic and cinematic. And finally, we have the character, which I was able to do just through getting a Mixamo animation and really kind of separating out all the different mocap elements Now, I was also able to use the RCOO add-on to put this animation onto a character that I really wanted to use. And RCOO is also the sponsor of this video. Using the free RCOO add-on, I was totally able to retarget the animation really seamlessly, and it made the whole last part of this process way simpler. It was pretty easy to go from importing the mocap data and then retargeting it back onto the character using the RCOO add-on retargeting system. That again is totally free to use. If you're interested in RCOO, I have a link in the description that you can use to get 5% off your purchase. So after all that, I rendered everything and then put it into Resolve for editing. And here is the final animation. So honestly, this was pretty ridiculous animation that I put together. I was excited to do like a title sequence-esque animation that also had roots in product design, because that's just what I'm interested in. Was more fascinating because it could be lore accurate with the actual lightsaber itself. There was something really interesting about taking this whole thing apart and putting it back together, especially because there was already all this lore about it that made a lot of sense, and it really was cool to actually have it all together like that. If you're interested in more cinematic breakdowns, definitely hit subscribe and comment below and let me know what you want to see broken down again. I'm thinking about doing like the Harry Potter wand, something like that, or working on more effects, so definitely let me know in the comments.